Hi everyone and welcome back to another video. In this video I'm going to be continuing my series on murderers who were jailed in England in a specific month of the year, looking in this video at April 2025. I've selected 12 cases involving 15 individuals jailed for the offence of murder. I'll go through briefly what they did, the victim in the case, the sentence that they received, and then I'll try and pick out something noteworthy from the case, such as the judge's comments when sentencing. Welcome to my channel, Andy on Crime, where I talk about high-profile criminal cases and other aspects of criminal law in England and Wales. And if you are on other social media platforms, then you can follow me on TikTok. My handle is AndyOnCrime1, and I'm also on Twitter or X, and my handle is AndyOnCrime. So if you're on those platforms, then please do give me a follow. If you would like to support my channel, then you can become a member and get some exclusive perks, or you can click the link in the description down below and sign up with NordVPN, where you can get a huge discount on a range of their plans. Or alternatively, you can buy some Andy on Crime merch, such as this unironed t-shirt that I'm wearing. If you do buy one, I guarantee that you will look much better than I do wearing it. Now, before I get into this video, I just want to remind, and regular viewers will have heard me say this time and time again, but anyone convicted of murder in England and Wales will be given a mandatory life sentence. The only question is how long the minimum term or tariff will be. That's the period that the person will spend in prison in full before they are eligible to apply for release. It doesn't mean they will be released, it's only if they satisfy the parole board that they're no longer a danger to the public will they be released. Now, in rare cases, someone can be given something called a whole life order. That's simply where there is no minimum term. That person will never be released unless they successfully appeal their sentence. And as of recording this video, there's between 75 and 80 people currently serving that sentence. So with all that being said, let's get into the video. At number 1 is Kyle Kitchen, who was sentenced on the 2nd of April. In November 2014, Kitchen, who was then 38, violently shook his 8-week-old daughter, Primrose Keahn, in their Camden home in North London. This assault resulted in severe brain injuries and a fractured skull, leaving Primrose profoundly disabled and in constant pain. Following that assault, Kitchen was convicted of 2 counts of causing grievous bodily harm with intent and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Primrose's mother, Kenzie Keahn, was also found guilty of causing or allowing serious injury to her child by failing to protect her daughter and received a 3.5-year sentence. Primrose was placed in the care of her maternal grandmother, Maria Keahn. Despite her profound disabilities, including cerebral palsy and drug-resistant epilepsy, she attended a specialist school in Plumstead, southeast London, where she was remembered as characterful. On the 17th of May 2021, at the age of 6, Primrose passed away. A post-mortem examination concluded that her death was a direct consequence of the traumatic head injury inflicted when she was a baby. In light of Primrose's death, Kitchen was charged with her murder whilst already serving his previous sentence. He pleaded not guilty and stood trial at the Old Bailey. During the trial, the prosecution highlighted the volatile relationship between Kitchen and Primrose's mother, noting a prior incident where Kitchen was arrested for assaulting Kenzie Keahn whilst she held Primrose. The jury found Kitchen guilty of murder after deliberating for over 6 hours. On the 2nd of April 2025, he received a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. Due to the time that he has already served in prison, Kitchen will be eligible for parole in 7 years and 8 months. At number 2 is Joel Laurel Simpson, who was sentenced on the 3rd of April. On the 19th of June 2024, at a property in Arundel Close in Hull, which was being used for drug dealing, Simpson stabbed David Hunt 9 times on the landing of the house. David had attempted to enter the property, but was initially refused. Simpson and his co-defendant, 20-year-old Dean Dawkins, were present at the address during the attack. The court heard that the property was associated with County Lines drug dealing. Following the attack, David collapsed outside the property, and despite efforts by an off-duty doctor to save him, he died from his injuries. During Simpson's trial, his demeanour was noted, and he reportedly grinned and made gestures towards supporters in the public gallery as he was led from the dock. Simpson was found guilty of murder, but his co-defendant Dawkins was cleared but was found guilty of a charge of manslaughter. On the 3rd of April 2025, 16-year-old Simpson was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 14 years. The judge lifted the reporting restrictions during sentencing, allowing Simpson to be named publicly for the first time. At number 3 is Leigh Smith, who was sentenced on the 8th of April. Smith, a 39-year-old man from Lancaster, was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of 49-year-old Keith Thompson in Heysham in Lancashire. The incident occurred in the early hours of the 28th of September 2024, when Smith launched a prolonged and extremely violent attack on Keith, involving repeated kicking, hitting, and punching. Emergency services found Keith slumped against a wall near the Bay Medical Centre. He was taken to hospital, but later died from blunt force trauma to the head. Initially, Smith denied the charge of murder and an earlier assault causing actual bodily harm on another victim. However, on the 7th day of his trial at Preston Crown Court, he changed his sentence and pled guilty to both offences. He was subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years and 177 days. This is to reflect the time that he has already spent in prison. Additionally, he received a concurrent sentence of 36 weeks for the separate assault. At number 4 is Wahib Albaradan, who was sentenced on the 8th of April. In November 2023, Albaradan, a 37-year-old Syrian asylum seeker residing in Dewsbury in West Yorkshire, committed the brutal murder of his wife, 27-year-old Salam Ashara. The attack occurred in their home on Durnley Street, where Albaradan used 2 knives and a razor in a prolonged, persistent and frenzied assault, inflicting at least 20 wounds on Salam. The assault took place in their children's bedroom, and a full baby bottle was found at the scene, suggesting that she was feeding the baby when the attack began. Following the murder, Albaradan removed all phones from the house to prevent Salam from calling for help, and then he fled the scene. He was apprehended the next morning after a significant police manhunt. The couple had married in Syria and had 4 children. They moved to the UK in 2020, settling in Dewsbury in 2021. Neighbours described Salam as timid and withdrawn, but really nice. Leeds Crown Court heard that Albaradan had become increasingly paranoid and controlling, accusing Salam of dishonouring him by speaking to other men and disapproving of her using messaging apps like WhatsApp. He had previously threatened to kill her, and she had expressed concerns to her family about his behaviour. Albaradan pleaded guilty to murder on the first day of his trial, and on the 8th of April 2025, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 19 years and 6 months. The judge described him as a jealous and controlling husband who had bullied and manipulated Salam. At number 5 is Keon Williams and Kai Nelson Palmer, who were sentenced on the 8th of April. On the 23rd of May 2023, Williams and Nelson Palmer murdered their former friend, 22-year-old Lucas Sutton. The attack, which occurred in Croydon in South London, was meticulously planned via Snapchat messages, where Williams and Nelson Palmer coordinated their actions to lure Lucas into a fatal ambush. The motive behind the murder stemmed from a perceived betrayal. Lucas had attempted to dispose of a firearm he had been holding for the group, an act interpreted by Williams and Nelson Palmer as a breach of trust. This perceived disloyalty led them to orchestrate a plan to eliminate him. On the evening of the attack, Lucas was invited to a residence in Croydon under the guise of a social gathering. After purchasing drinks from a local shop, he was ambushed upon his return. Williams produced a knife and stabbed Lucas, who attempted to flee but was pursued and stabbed again. Despite seeking refuge in a nearby pub, Lucas succumbed to his injuries shortly after being transferred to hospital. Investigations revealed that both Williams and Nelson Palmer had been communicating on Snapchat in the days leading up to the murder, detailing their intentions. CCTV footage captured Williams wearing a distinctive balaclava during the attack, which was later recovered by police. These pieces of evidence were instrumental in building a case against the defendants. At the Old Bailey, Williams, who was then 21, was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 23 years. Nelson Palmer, who had just turned 18, was also found guilty and received a life sentence with a minimum term of 16 years. A third man, who was aged 19 and also stood trial alongside Williams and Nelson Palmer, was acquitted of all charges. At number 6 is Maureen Rickards, who was sentenced on the 9th of April. In June 2024, Rickards, a 50-year-old former law student from Canterbury in Kent, murdered her husband, 65-year-old geologist Jeremy Rickards. The couple had been married for 27 years. This case revealed a harrowing pattern of domestic abuse, culminating in a brutal killing and a calculated attempt to conceal the crime. Jeremy was last seen on the 7th of June 2024. Maureen Rickards had claimed that he had travelled to Saudi Arabia for work and later stated that he had died there. However, police found no evidence supporting these claims. On the 11th of July 2024, following reports of a foul odour, officers discovered Jeremy's decomposed body buried in the couple's garden, wrapped in bin bags and concealed under grass clippings. A post-mortem examination revealed that Jeremy had been stabbed 5 times, including twice in the heart, and had suffered prior injuries such as fractured ribs and a broken nose, indicative of sustained abuse. Forensic evidence suggested his body had initially been stored in the attic before being moved into the garden. Throughout the investigation, Rickards maintained her innocence, even asking police what body upon her arrest. She used Jeremy's bank cards after his death and sent misleading messages from his phone to their daughter, attempting to fabricate a narrative of his departure and death abroad. During her trial, the court heard that Maureen had subjected Jeremy to prolonged physical and psychological abuse. Audio and video recordings captured her verbally and physically assaulting him, including threats to kill, and witnesses noted Jeremy's deteriorating condition in the weeks leading up to his death, describing him as frail and bruised. Rickards was found guilty of murder and was sentenced on the 9th of April 2025 to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years. Rickards was absent during her sentencing, citing health issues, but the judge proceeded in her absence, emphasising the deliberate and calculated nature of her actions. At number 7 is Matthew Higgins, who was sentenced on the 10th of April. On the 28th of September 2024, Higgins, who was 36, murdered his friend David Eaton, who was 37, following a fatal stabbing in Northwich in Cheshire. The incident occurred at Higgins' residence on Brook Lane, where both men, along with a 41-year-old woman, had been drinking heavily. The altercation stemmed from a childish prank in which Higgins shaved off David's eyebrow whilst he slept, leading to escalating tensions between the pair. The day after the prank, David confronted Higgins in the street, physically assaulting him without causing serious injury. Later that day at Higgins' home, the confrontation resumed. According to court proceedings, Higgins, under the influence of alcohol, retrieved a kitchen knife, lured David into the hallway, and stabbed him twice in the heart, resulting in David's death. Following the attack, Higgins approached a neighbour, reportedly stating, "I've stabbed my mate, he was doing my effing head in." Upon arrival, police found Higgins attempting to administer first aid to David and claiming that David had fallen on the knife. Despite these assertions, the jury rejected Higgins' self-defense claim, leading to his conviction for murder. During his arrest, Higgins became aggressive, headbutting a police officer, an act for which he later pleaded guilty to assaulting an emergency worker. The 41-year-old woman present during the incident was arrested but was subsequently released without charge. On the 10th of April 2025, following his conviction for murder, Higgins was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 18 years. The judge described Higgins' actions as vengeful and vindictive, noting that Higgins had allowed his anger to escalate into lethal violence. At number 8 is Zahir Abbas, who was sentenced on the 11th of April. In April 2025, Abbas, a 45-year-old man from Reading, was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 20 years for his role in the 2021 murder of his brother-in-law Amjad Hussain in Watford. Although Abbas was not present at the crime scene, the court found that he had groomed and manipulated his cousin Hussain Amjad into committing the murder. The incident occurred on the 28th of October 2021, when 52-year-old Amjad Hussain was found with serious injuries in an upstairs bedroom by family members. Despite the efforts of emergency services, he was pronounced dead shortly after 7 p.m. Investigations revealed that Abbas had exerted significant influence over his cousin, encouraging him to carry out the fatal attack. This manipulation was a key factor in the prosecution's case, highlighting Abbas's indirect yet pivotal role in the murder. Hussain Amjad, who was aged 25, was previously convicted in December 2023 for the murder of his father. He received a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. During Abbas's trial at St Albans Crown Court, which lasted nearly 8 weeks, the jury delivered a unanimous verdict on the 6th of February 2025. During sentencing, the judge acknowledged the complexity of the case, given Abbas's absence from the crime scene, and commended the investigative team's efforts in securing the conviction. At number 9, we have Mehakdeep Singh and Sehajpal Singh, who were sentenced on the 11th of April. On the 21st of August 2023, Mehakdeep Singh and Sehajpal Singh, both from Tipton in the West Midlands, murdered 23-year-old DPD delivery driver Rammon Singh in an attack that was described as a premeditated ambush involving multiple assailants and a range of weapons. The motive for the attack stemmed from an incident at a kabaddi tournament in Derbyshire the day prior, where a friend of the attackers was allegedly assaulted. In retaliation, the group orchestrated a plan to target Rammon, who was not directly involved in the initial altercation. They obtained his delivery route information from an insider called Sukhmandeep Singh, a colleague at DPD, who was later convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. On the day of the murder, the assailants lay in wait on Berwick Avenue in Cotton Hill in Shrewsbury as Rammon made his deliveries. They launched a brutal attack using an array of weapons, including an axe, golf club, hockey stick, shovel, knife, and cricket bat. The assault was so severe that Rammon was pronounced dead at the scene. Following the attack, Mehakdeep and Sehajpal Singh fled in a white Mercedes-Benz, which they later abandoned. They then took a taxi to Shrewsbury railway station, boarded a train to Wolverhampton, and eventually fled the country. They were eventually apprehended in Austria on the 20th of May 2024 and were subsequently extradited to the United Kingdom to face trial. During the trial at Stafford Crown Court, the jury was presented with doorbell camera footage showing the moments leading up to the attack. The footage depicted the assailants approaching Rammon's van, armed and with masks. The prosecution emphasised the calculated nature of the ambush and the collective intent to kill. And in April 2025, having been found guilty of murder, Mehakdeep and Sehajpal Singh were sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 28 years. At number 10 is Ian James Franklin, who was sentenced on the 14th of April. On the 17th of August 2024, following a dispute over an alleged £1,000 drug-related debt, Franklin murdered Gregory Marshall. Franklin also attacked and was found guilty of unlawfully wounding Jason Roberts and carrying a bladed article in public. The confrontation began when Gregory and Jason Rhodes visited Franklin's home on Roche Avenue to address the outstanding debt. An altercation ensued during which Franklin stabbed Gregory multiple times in the chest, neck, and face. Gregory managed to flee but collapsed in a nearby alleyway and was pronounced dead at hospital shortly thereafter. Evidence presented at Leeds Crown Court revealed that Franklin had armed himself with a kitchen knife prior to the attack. CCTV footage captured the moments leading up to the stabbing, showing Franklin chasing Gregory and Jason Rhodes whilst brandishing the weapon. Jason Rhodes sustained a stab wound to the shoulder during the incident. Franklin claimed that he had acted in self-defense, asserting that he had intervened after Gregory allegedly assaulted his partner. However, the jury rejected this defense, concluding that Franklin's actions were disproportionate and deliberate. The prosecution highlighted that Gregory was unarmed at the time of the attack. During the trial, it was disclosed that Franklin had a history of carrying weapons and had previously threatened Gregory with a machete. On the night of the murder, Franklin retrieved a knife from his home before confronting Gregory and Jason Rhodes. This premeditated behaviour undermined his self-defense claim. Franklin was convicted, and on the 14th of April 2025, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. At number 11 is Thomas Sykes, who was sentenced on the 15th of April. In August 2022, Thomas Sykes, who was aged 41, murdered his father, Anthony Tony Sykes, who was aged 67. The crime occurred at their shared flat on Byron Road in Tamworth in Staffordshire, and the case came to light when a neighbour, concerned about Tony's well-being, alerted the police after noticing Thomas digging a hole in the garden. Upon investigation, officers discovered Tony's body concealed in a cardboard box inside a shed behind the flat. A freshly dug, grave-sized hole was also found nearby, along with gardening tools, suggesting an attempt to bury the body. Forensic examinations revealed bloodstains on the carpet and furniture, and sections of blood-soaked carpet had been cut out and placed in a bin bag in a wheelie bin outside of the house. A post-mortem examination determined that Tony had suffered head injuries and facial injuries, leading to his death several days before the body's discovery. During police interviews, Thomas Sykes denied responsibility, claiming he found his father deceased and he panicked, deciding to conceal the body instead of notifying the authorities. However, the jury rejected this account and found that he was guilty of the murder of his father following a 2-week trial at Stafford Crown Court. The court heard that Thomas Sykes had a history of bullying and physically abusing his father over a 15-year period. In the days leading up to the murder, Tony had contacted emergency services, expressing fear for his safety after discovering his wallet had been stolen. A confrontation over this theft is believed to have led to the fatal assault. After the murder, Thomas Sykes continued to use his father's bank card to make cash withdrawals. He was observed dancing to music in the kitchen whilst his father's body was decomposing in the bedroom, indicating a lack of remorse. He also visited his mother during this period, showing no signs of distress or guilt. On the 15th of April 2025, Sykes was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 18 years and 212 days, reflecting the period that he had spent in custody awaiting trial. During the sentencing, the judge highlighted Thomas Sykes' lack of remorse and the prolonged abuse that he inflicted on his frail father. She noted that Thomas Sykes had turned his father's home, a place that should have been a sanctuary, into a site of regular assault and intimidation. At number 12 is David Walcott and Rammon Malley, who were sentenced on the 17th of April. On the 12th of April 2024, 22-year-old Ricard Sifa was fatally stabbed in Croydon, South London, by Walcott, who was 35, and Malley, who was 33. The attack occurred in Fellmonger's Yard, near the Surrey Street Market, where Ricard was chased and stabbed 13 times in a rapid assault lasting approximately 20 seconds. Despite immediate assistance from bystanders and emergency services, Ricard succumbed to his injuries at the scene. Following the attack, Walcott and Malley fled the scene and proceeded to the Spread Eagle pub on Catherine Street, where they ordered 3 pints of Guinness. They left the pub shortly thereafter, and a police investigation was launched, during which officers reviewed over 100 hours of CCTV footage, leading to the identification of the suspects. Walcott was apprehended on the 19th of April at an address in Lewin Road in SW16 and was charged the following day. Malley fled the country on the 16th of April, but was arrested upon his return to Gatwick Airport on the 5th of May 2024, and he was also subsequently charged. During the trial at the Old Bailey, both defendants claimed they were present during the incident, but denied involvement in the stabbing. However, the jury unanimously found them guilty of murder on the 26th of February 2025. Walcott was also convicted of possessing a bladed article in a public place. On the 17th of April 2025, the judge sentenced both men to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 27 years. The judge described the killings as planned, quick, and brutal, emphasizing the premeditated nature of the attack carried out by 3 individuals armed with knives. A third suspect, identified as Jordan Vincent, remains at large, and the Metropolitan Police have issued a £10,000 reward for information leading to his arrest and conviction.